What if the person who broke your heart was never meant to love you gently, but to awaken you violently? We are taught to fear the ones who leave us shattered, but Carl Jung saw it differently. He understood that some lovers don't come into our lives to stay. They come to disrupt, to mirror the unconscious, to trigger the exact emotional earthquakes that force our soul to rise from its sleep. You think it's just heartbreak, but it's alchemy. You think they abandoned you, but they delivered you back to yourself. These are not failed relationships. These are sacred appointments written into the fabric of your becoming. So if you've ever met someone who turned your world inside out, only to vanish, this is your story. Because sometimes the most important lovers are not the ones who stay. They're the ones who break you open. There's a kind of lover who doesn't arrive to complete your life, but to disrupt the illusion that it was ever whole to begin with. Carl Jung would have called them an archetype of the Awakener, a psychic force embodied in human form, whose presence catalyzes deep confrontation with the unconscious. These lovers don't whisper sweet nothings. They reflect your blind spots. They surface buried wounds. They challenge the masks you didn't even know you were wearing. In their eyes, something ancient stirs, a memory not of comfort, but of chaos, growth, and inevitable transformation. And while the ego may label them as destructive, the soul knows better. They're not meant to fit into your story. They're meant to rewrite it, because love, in its highest expression, isn't about validation, it's about evolution. These relationships often feel fated, electric, charged with a strange familiarity. That's because, on a soul level, you do know them, not necessarily from past lives in the linear sense, but from archetypal patterns etched into your psychic DNA. The moment you meet, something inside you whispers, "This one will change everything." And they do, but not the way we dream of in romance novels. Instead of happily ever after, they bring upheaval, emotional storms, identity crises. But within that dismantling lies the sacred key. They make you face yourself. Entirely, no filters, no projections, just you, raw, real, and awakening. Jung believed that relationships serve as mirrors for the unconscious. The people who trigger you most often carry the pieces of yourself you've disowned. So these awakeners arrive not to stay forever, but to shatter the illusion that anyone outside you can complete you. They come to ignite the process of individuation, becoming whole in yourself. Their gift is not comfort, but consciousness. Not security, but self-revelation. And once you see who they really are in your journey, not a life partner, but a soul mirror, the pain begins to alchemize into power. Because you finally realize they didn't break your heart, they broke your trance. According to Carl Jung, every human being carries a shadow, the unconscious repository of all we repress, deny, or cannot yet integrate. And nowhere does this shadow show up more vividly than in the realm of intimate relationships. Why? Because love brings proximity, and proximity brings projection. We don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with the parts of ourselves we see, or want to see, in them. But those same people who awaken desire also awaken discomfort. Their presence disturbs the carefully constructed identity we've built. They echo back the wounds of childhood, the betrayals we never healed, the emotions we've labeled as too much or not enough. Jung called this the shadow projection. We unconsciously assign our hidden parts to the other, then react when they mirror them back to us. This is why the lovers who truly awaken us rarely feel easy to be around. They don't coddle our coping mechanisms. They don't fit neatly into the expectations of the ego. Instead, they unknowingly dance with our shadow, bringing it to light not through cruelty, but through their very existence. And often, the more magnetic the connection, the deeper the shadow work it demands. Every trigger becomes a portal. Every conflict is an invitation. They're not trying to hurt you. They're showing you where you're still fragmented, still reactive, still carrying unconscious pain. It's not about blame, it's about reflection. These moments aren't signs to run. They're signs to look within. Jung believed that healing only happens when the unconscious becomes conscious. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And so, the disruptive lover is actually a sacred emissary, sent by the psyche to bring the unseen into view. They don't ruin your peace. They reveal where it never truly existed. To meet such a lover is to meet your hidden self, the angry self, the abandoned self, the longing self. And through this uncomfortable mirror, you begin to reclaim those exiled parts. Slowly, painfully, you move toward wholeness, not despite the relationship, but because of it. There's a mysterious pull that sometimes overtakes us, a magnetic force that feels impossible to explain. It's not always logical. It's not even always healthy, but it's undeniably potent. Jung might say this is the subconscious choosing what the conscious mind cannot yet understand, a form of soul-level gravity, drawing you into relationships that serve not your comfort, but your evolution. This is where we must differentiate chemistry from destiny. Chemistry often masquerades as fate, electric touches, intense eye contact, a sense of recognition. But true destiny, in the Jungian sense, is about psychological necessity. These are the people who carry the precise frequency to activate what's been dormant inside you. They speak to your wounds in a language only your shadow understands. Why do we feel pulled to those who hurt us, challenge us, or disappear? Because on a subconscious level, the psyche is always seeking integration. That's the law of psychic balance. The person who ignites your insecurity may be the one whose presence is meant to surface your lack of self-worth, not to wound you further, but to invite you to reclaim your power. It's not that you're addicted to pain, it's that pain becomes the teacher when nothing else could reach you. These lovers are psychological catalysts. Like fire to the alchemist's crucible, they provoke the inner transformation that peaceful partners could never awaken. The friction isn't failure. It's fermentation. Something ancient is trying to rise. Jung often warned against mistaking comfort for alignment. What feels good isn't always what serves growth, and what feels intense isn't always toxic. The key is awareness. Are you reliving old trauma unconsciously, or consciously entering the fire to burn away illusion? That's the difference between karmic repetition and sacred initiation. The soul doesn't seek what's easy. It seeks what's necessary for wholeness. That's why some lovers appear like storms. They arrive to realign your internal compass, even if it means shaking the foundations of who you thought you were. Their role isn't to stay, it's to reroute you to yourself. Heartbreak is one of the most feared human experiences, yet in the spiritual realm, it is often the crucible of transformation. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He didn't view emotional pain as failure, but as the psyche's way of cracking the ego so the soul can emerge. When a lover leaves, betrays, or breaks us open, something far more sacred may be occurring beneath the surface, the awakening of selfhood. In the West, we tend to pathologize heartbreak as if it's a sickness to be medicated or bypassed, but ancient wisdom traditions knew better. They saw heartbreak as holy, as a rite of passage. The moment the protective walls collapse and we are forced to feel the full spectrum of what it means to be human. It's in that rawness that the soul speaks the loudest. When someone tears through your emotional body, what's actually being exposed is your attachment to identity. You mourn not only the person, but the version of yourself that existed in their presence. You grieve the dreams, the comfort, the illusions. But in that death lies a hidden resurrection. Something new wants to be born, and it can only emerge when the old has fully dissolved. Jung believed that the psyche uses symbols and emotional intensity to bring unconscious content into awareness. And heartbreak is often one of the most effective symbols. It awakens primal feelings, forces surrender, breaks routine. And in that chaos, the soul seizes its chance to guide you toward your deeper purpose, not in spite of the loss, but through it. This is why many spiritual awakenings begin with heartbreak. Not the kind that breaks you into pieces, but the kind that breaks open your soul. It's not a punishment. It's an initiation, a sacred tearing away of what no longer aligns with your highest truth. And while the ego screams in pain, the soul breathes in relief. Finally, there's space to grow. In time, you'll realize the heartbreak wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The moment your soul took the wheel and said, no more illusions, no more settling, no more smallness. And so, while they may have left your life, they left you with the greatest gift, the blueprint of who you are becoming. Carl Jung coined the term synchronicity to describe meaningful coincidences, those eerie alignments that defy logic but carry a sense of cosmic orchestration. When it comes to transformational relationships, synchronicity often plays a starring role. You meet them at the exact moment you're unraveling or evolving, not a minute too soon, not a moment too late. There's often something uncanny about the arrival of a disruptive lover. Maybe you dreamed about them before you met. Maybe your paths crossed in improbable ways. Maybe you felt something shift the instant you saw them. These aren't just romantic curiosities. They are synchronistic activations, signaling that a major archetypal force is now in motion within your psyche. Jung believed these synchronistic encounters aren't accidents. They're orchestrated by the self, the higher organizing intelligence within you that's always guiding you toward individuation, wholeness, and truth. The disruptive lover appears not by chance, but by necessity. They emerge precisely when you are psychically ready to confront what you've been avoiding. Timing matters. You don't attract these lovers when you're asleep to your patterns. You attract them when the soul is ready to shake the cage. When the inner system, even unconsciously, knows it's time to evolve. The universe doesn't send chaos without purpose. It sends mirrors. And the arrival of such a lover is the universe saying, you're ready to see yourself. This doesn't mean these lovers are always meant to stay. In fact, the intensity often makes longevity impossible. Their purpose is to catalyze, not to comfort, to stir the pot, not to preserve peace. And once their role is fulfilled, the synchronicities may cease, the magic may fade, because their task, your transformation, has already begun. When you look back, you'll realize they came exactly when you needed them most, not to love you forever, but to awaken you forever. That's the paradox of synchronicity. It doesn't always bring what the ego wants, but it always delivers what the soul needs. In Jungian psychology, individuation is the sacred journey of becoming whole, of integrating the unconscious with the conscious, the shadow with the light, the false self with the true. And paradoxically, few things accelerate individuation more than the pain of separation. When a lover leaves, they often leave behind a broken version of you, but also the raw material for your transformation. Separation is not merely emotional, it is spiritual surgery. It severs attachments, strips illusions, and exposes the scaffolding of self-worth that was built around another's presence. And in that void, the space where there used to be, you're left with one companion, yourself. For the first time, you meet the unadorned, unvalidated, unfiltered you. Jung taught that every external loss is mirrored by an internal confrontation. Who are you without their reflection, without their desire, without the narrative you co-authored? These questions don't just ache, they awaken, because they pull you out of the relational trance and thrust you into the underworld of the self. And from that darkness, clarity begins to glow. There is a kind of power that only emerges when you survive what you thought would destroy you. It's not the power of control, but the power of inner cohesion, of knowing who you are, independent of who you've loved. Separation, then, becomes less of a wound and more of a right. It's not the end of connection. It's the beginning of sovereignty. The lovers who leave, whether gently or abruptly, often leave you closer to your core than those who stayed, because their absence forced presence, their silence birthed inner dialogue, and their departure cleared the space for a deeper self to arrive. This is the soul's alchemy, turning grief into gold and endings into emergence. So you see, they didn't abandon you. They initiated you. They didn't destroy your path. They revealed it. And through the sacred spiral of loss, you didn't just become whole again. You became someone new, someone real, someone you were always meant to meet. Alchemy, in its deepest essence, is not about turning lead into literal gold, but transforming the dense, heavy emotions of the psyche into the radiant light of consciousness. And in the domain of love, no figure plays the role of the alchemist more powerfully than the disruptive lover, the one who breaks your rhythm, the one who turns your inner world upside down. Jung revered alchemy as a symbolic map of psychological transformation. Each phase of the alchemical process, calcination, dissolution, separation, conjunction, mirrors the emotional stages we undergo in relationships that demand deep growth. And when love becomes fire, it's not a mistake, it's initiation. The flames aren't meant to destroy you. They're meant to purify what no longer serves. These lovers often enter your life during times of psychic stagnation, when your inner world has gone quiet, too controlled, too rehearsed. They introduce chaos, not as punishment, but as potential. They provoke jealousy, insecurity, rage, longing. And in doing so, they stir the unconscious contents that must rise for you to evolve. That's alchemy in motion, the transformation of raw, painful emotion into sacred self-awareness. In their reflection, you begin to see where you gave away your power, where you sought approval, where you still carried unmet needs from childhood. These revelations aren't always gentle, but they're gold, because once seen, they can be healed, integrated, transmuted. You become not only the lover, but the alchemist of your own soul. The alchemical lover doesn't stay forever. Their role is not permanence, it's purification. They are the sacred disruptor who brings the elements, mixes them, explodes them, and leaves behind something far more refined, a version of you who knows your value not because someone stayed, but because you stayed with yourself through the fire. So, don't curse the one who caused the storm. Thank them. They gave you the laboratory, the elements, the friction, and now the gold is yours to claim, not on your skin, but in your soul. There's a distinct pain in letting go of someone who felt like destiny, even when, deep down, you know their role in your life was never meant to be permanent. Carl Jung taught us that not all relationships are designed to last, but all relationships are designed to teach. And in that truth lies the grace of conscious release. To let go consciously means to release without resentment, to mourn without attachment, to honor their soul for playing the exact role your evolution required, not as villain or savior, but as mirror, as catalyst, as a sacred messenger cloaked in human form. Even the chaos they brought holds meaning. Even the goodbye was part of the plan. This doesn't mean denying your grief. Grief is sacred. It's the soul's way of acknowledging that something real occurred. But it also means you don't have to turn pain into bitterness. You don't have to label the experience as failure. You can instead say, "This was holy. This changed me. This revealed me to myself. Jung spoke often about the power of conscious awareness. When we bring intentionality to our letting go, we reclaim energy that would otherwise spiral into regret or obsession. We don't close the door with anger, we close it with reverence. We don't ask why they didn't stay. We ask what part of us was born through their leaving. There's a kind of freedom that only comes when you release with wisdom, when you stop needing closure and start embodying it. When you realize they were never yours, they were simply crossing your soul path at a divine intersection. And that's enough. The impact they made doesn't vanish with their absence. It becomes part of your inner architecture. So you send them love, not to call them back, but to bless them on their path. And in doing so, you bless your own. Because letting go isn't the end of the story. It's the moment your story begins to breathe with truth. No longer seeking love to feel whole, but radiating wholeness as your natural state. Some souls come not to walk beside you, but to strike the match of remembrance. They don't bring peace, they bring fire, the kind that burns through illusion, the kind that leaves you scorched, raw, and finally real. You may call it heartbreak, but your soul calls it rebirth. You didn't lose love, you were initiated by it. You didn't get abandoned, you were delivered back to your sacred center. So honor the ones who awakened your pain. Bless the ones who could never stay, because their leaving was the ritual that made room for your becoming. If this message stirred something deep within you, if you felt the mystery of love that transforms more than it comforts, then like this video, share your story, and subscribe to the Cosmic Awakening channel. Because here, we don't just heal, we remember who we truly are.